My name is Alyssa Pacey, and I'm the archivist at the Cambridge Public Library. And today I would like to talk about the history of voting in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In particular, the history of African Americans and women and how they gained the right to vote in Cambridge. But really, when you're
Welcome to Happiness in the City. This is Barbara, and today I'd like to talk about a very important concept, very important word, and that is attention. There's a lot of concern today about how we relate to each other. And one of the ways people relate to each other is by the faculty of our life, which is known as attention, that involves hearing, listening, interacting, perceiving, comprehending, and it is a very complex concept. Many of you have been trained to be teachers or journalists, and you understand how important it is to establish connection of attention between a teacher and students, or between a journalist and readers or hearers of news stories. So we need to understand this concept is extremely important. As you have noticed, I've been trying to take our conversations away from matters of punitive justice into areas of positive ways in which we can interact. One of the definitions of attention in Merriam-Webster is that it is the act or state of applying the mind to something. So attention, by definition, is relationship between what is within us and what is outside, or what we are thinking about. So it can be also within us, but it is a faculty that has the capability of connecting. So attention is a form of connection, a form of contact with something. And one of the examples here is, if we should pay attention to what she says, we would be able to know the price of the latest cars. Another definition here is a condition of readiness for such an attention, involving especially a selective narrowing or focusing of consciousness and receptivity. So here we have attention connected to the concept of focusing, of consciousness and receptivity. And this is extremely important, because if we promote readiness to focus on good things, noble things, beautiful things, that creates readiness within our consciousness to receive those. If we focus on punishments and criticism and denigration and defaming people, then the consciousness receives that. And that creates a spiral of more and more negative emotion overwhelming the entire biological capability of receiving information. So we have to look at the situation that our attention relates to from the point of view of the nature of attention. I encourage you to read the Wikipedia article on this. Is huge because the concept of attention refers to many fields, to neurological sciences, to educational sciences, to computing, to economics. It's very extensive application of our mind to connect to information in diverse fields, and also to have the nature to connect to information and objects and persons outside of ourselves. For instance, if someone walks down the street and pays attention only to trees, he or she will eliminate the fact that there are passers-by, there are people around, or cars. And one of the natures of attention is that ability to be selective. So what we select is what would be received by the brain, by our lives, as a guiding information, as information directing our actions, words, and ways. Today we have also a lot of our attention created in the context of technology, algorithms, and that is a situation in which we really have to pay attention to what those algorithms do to direct our attention. It is not something that is that should be taken for granted. We have to understand the nature and content of what an algorithm could do for us to connect to or ignore. Because we may have a situation in which programmed algorithms direct our attention to irrelevant things and we don't connect to what is right for our particular situations. So the faculty of attention is one of the central ways in which we connect. And before we can talk about justice or politics or elections or evaluation of our people, we have to understand what is it that we are receiving in our attention, what is it that we are focusing on, and what we ignore. And in this situation, attention is connected with search for truth and connecting attention to truth. And the concept of truth is not very neutral. As some of you know my story, I was lame for 15 years, couldn't walk straight, with deformed leg. And then one day, 21 years ago, God healed me from that condition, and the limb was healed and became the same length as the other limb. So in this situation, both facts are true. But the timing and the fact of the transformation of those situations creates complexity of truth. And this is in many of our lives. Certain things were true in the past, and then some transformations happen, and we consider other things to be true, or we connect to other forms of truth that defines our lives. So just the fact that someone did something in the past doesn't mean it was a lie. It just means it was truth from a different time period. So what I'm saying is we have to pay attention to complexity of attention as it develops throughout our lifespans. There's a lot of demand today to alter the memory of our lives according to what we believe today. But that would create a lie. If, for instance, I would say, no, I was never injured, it has always been like this, it wouldn't be true. But the historical development of an individual's lives create complexity of truth within a lifespan. And I think that one of the ways we can develop social connections of peace is when we become very understanding of this and search for truth in the present and in the future without altering the truth of the past, just accepting it as something that happened in the past and that we evolved or we got new information or circumstances or people in our lives changed and we started paying attention to other things. It does not change the value of what was in the past as the truth of the past. And that connects to history of nations or achievements of nations. Just because today we disagree with certain social values doesn't mean that what our ancestors did was wrong. It was simply within the context of attention from different circumstances. So if we, for instance, today pay attention to global interconnections between people of the earth, it doesn't mean that what our ancestors did by focusing on the regions was wrong. It was attention shaped in the truth of a different time period and different epoch. And we have to develop that wisdom about attention, not only in what we perceive and receive and understand today and what we think about the future, but also how we understand and evaluate the past. The best way in many situations from the past is to understand it and not to have it impact our present. For instance, my situation in which my leg was deformed is not defining me today because there's a different set of relationships and shapes. And one of the ways that this could be healed is because my perceptions of what I should pay attention to were influenced by my upbringing. I grew up in a Christian family, and when I came back to paying attention to it, all kinds of perceptual health showed up. And then God showed me His shape of my life, and that was the miraculous healing. So, in the context of our heritage, it would be foolish to ignore the good things that our ancestors paid attention to, because a lot of answers to our limits today can be found in the perceptual values and capacities of our inheritance, of what we inherit biologically, of what we inherit socially, economically, culturally, politically, geographically. So I think that if our attention becomes connected to things that are noble, that are good, that are true, there's a chance then that our perceptions will connect to things that would create social peace in our relationships. And this is what most people on earth want: to enjoy our lives, to enjoy health, to enjoy interactions, to enjoy our families. And if the attention and focus is within that desire, then there is a chance that that attention will connect people in ways that are affectionate, loving, and creating a sense of security and safety. On the other hand, if attention is focused on danger, on threats, on victimizations, on seeing everything through the lens of some sort of violation of a crime, then there is just no way to create connection to beauty and peace and happiness and joy and health. And that focus that we have today in many places on earth is on danger, not on a sense of joy and reliance of what our attention can handle. The connection between attention and perceptions is very powerful. Some people perceive things that are very sublime. Many people who believe in God have capacity to perceive things from Kingdom of God. It's a biological capacity that we can get through God of Israel and His Son Jesus Christ of Nazareth and Spirit of God. And this is a very important way to understand where we come from. Because if we ignore the heritage of faith, then our attention is very limited, because it goes into things that our being considers as lesser than what our ancestors experienced and managed to pass on to us. I remember when I was growing up, and I would go to a cathedral in Gdansk, and at that time, it was in the 60s, the prayers were in Latin. And Latin, as far as many of you know, was a language sanctified by the Roman Catholic Church, by Roman emperors. It was developed into a very holy, beautiful linguistic form of connecting us to communication and Kingdom of God. And the cathedral, being a gateway to heaven, was a place that I remember as a little girl going into and really experiencing God's presence in the dimensions of Kingdom of God. At that time I did not know what it was, but the memory of it is so powerful in me. And when I listen to some prayers in Latin, it revives perceptions in me that otherwise would not be available to me. So we have to respect that, because if we ignore that heritage, then we limit our perceptions. If we only focus on mundane things of our daily lives, then that attention would block what we could receive by paying attention to what is within our heritage. And another situation from my personal life is an incredible touch of life my grandmother had, my grandmother Janina. Anything she touched became a living, pulsating being, whether it was the earth she would walk around, or animals, or people. And I've been praying a lot to God to help me understand what it is that my grandmother had that would create this. And he said that she focused her attention on Jesus Christ as the life. She didn't pay attention to any other source of life except the fact that God is the source of life. So she would not criticize any neighbors, she would not blame anyone for making her sick or unhappy. She just focused directly on the pathway to God that would connect her to the fountain of life. And when I started paying attention to this myself, a lot of amazing things have been happening to me. And I wish I had paid attention to it earlier, because it is such a simple way of focusing our connection to what is positive, us, God, instead of us and some neighbor who messed up with us. So I encourage us to focus our attention and manage and control our focus on beautiful things, on God, on noble things, and to receive blessing from this first, and then look at what is happening around us. In other words, what we are doing today is not very happy, because a lot of focus is on blaming other people or demanding something for them, or forcing them to do something they don't want, or fighting what they want from us. So it's all very stressful and very tiring way of relating. Whereas if we focus our attention on developing perceptions of the highest good, then all of those other things come into a different light. A lot of those things would then be simply dissolved, because they would not be perceived anymore by us as the cause of our troubles, because our troubles would be healed and solved by God Himself. So in closing, I would encourage us to return to paying attention to what God says, His words, learning to perceive His voice, understanding how God's voice and God's Spirit is different from other voices and other spirits. I would recommend that we clearly learn to focus our perceptions on perceptions of loving, beautiful things from Kingdom of God, and meditating on those things, and meditating on the words of God and they come with life, and they come with wisdom, and they come with bringing within us the capacity to connect with the most glorious things that we can connect to. So the way in which attention connects to other things and people should be grounded in Jesus Christ as the way and in focusing on God. And that is something that every individual on earth can do. We have the capacity within us. Now we also have knowledge about God. There is not one person on earth that doesn't know about God. But many people don't know how to pay attention to those amazing things that we can connect to by acknowledging that we have the opportunity to develop our perceptions from the grace that God gives us. Our ancestors did this, why shouldn't we? And I think that if we do that, our lives will turn into the directions of health, pulsating life, and beautiful ways in which we interact with each other. Thank you so much for paying attention to this